God create war? Why does God create murder? Why does God create all the horrific things we see in the news, school shootings? Why would God create a mind that acts in that way?
Well, I think the traditional theistic answer to that is the free will defense. It's not that God created those things. He created free agents, knowing that it was better to create free agents who had the ability to choose, and therefore to choose to love him or not, or love each other or not, than it was to create puppets. But with that decision to create free moral agents, there was also the risk that people would use that freedom for to exploit others and to harm others.
Sorry, but how do you react to the argument of determinism then, in the face of this argument that God created free will?
Unpack that a little for me.
Determinism,
Yeah,
the concept that like when you see someone who's in jail, say he made a bad decision, he went to jail.
Right.
But if you go back through that person's life, you go through their their life, the childhood, the horrific traumas, all the abuse they've suffered, in and out of the justice system at a very young age, surrounded by crime.
Tragic stuff. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
It's not a free will issue entirely. There's a lot of variables.
Understood. The philosophical way of thinking about that is to make a distinction between a set of necessary conditions and sufficient conditions. Many of those. Well, actually, let me go a different direction. There's two different views of human nature. One is that we are moral agents, free moral agents, and one is that we're completely determined by genes, environment, or our evolutionary past. And I'm convinced that even in the face of terrible environmental conditions in our background, we are still free to choose. I think there are certain types of backgrounds that incline people towards a tendency to harm others and to do things that we would regard as crimes. But I think we still are free. I think that's a fundamental.
There's some real clear research into trauma in the developmental cycle of children, how it leads to psychopathy and all sorts of other real serious problems.
Sure, no question.
Where free will comes into question, and determinism makes a better argument.
I would. There's a great philosopher of mind.
How do you respond to that?
I would say that those are predisposing inclinations that are probably necessary to explain the behavior, but not sufficient. That I think even in the face of things that incline us towards certain courses of action, we still have choice. And I think there's a lot of brain physiological research that shows that that supports the idea that the mind is not completely determined by the neurophysiological correlates or the underlying brain chemistry.
Are we isolating for any reason?
What's that?
Are we isolating these two variables for any reason, whether it's determinism or free will? Like why does one have to win out?
I would agree. I think but if you allow any free will at all, then we're not completely determined.
But no one's saying completely.
Yeah,
I mean,
right. Well,
the determinism proponents are.
Then we're agreeing, Joe. I once heard an excellent lecture from Berkeley philosopher of mind, John Searle, and he was the guy who did that famous Chinese room paradox. And
what is that? It's not that famous.
Well, okay. Let's
Sorry,
bracket, and I'll get to the main point.
Okay.
The main thing is, and he showed that with all the research we've had in brain science and neuroscience, we've shown that there are lots of things that are necessary conditions of certain brain states, and necessary conditions, physiological, necessary physiological. So to have a certain brain state, there must be there are underlying physiological correlates that must be in place. To use that brain state to make a certain course of action, to accomplish a certain course of action, also there are necessary necessary conditions, necessary correlates. But he showed but we've never in the research showed that have closed the gap between necessary and sufficient. That just because those states are there doesn't mean that someone is forced to make that choice or to undertake that course of action. And so I think you have.
Well, you're aware of that as a person, though, right?
I'm aware of that as a person all the time. I've I wake up grumpy in the morning because I didn't get enough sleep, it doesn't mean
Right.
I have to slap one of my kids.
Of
you know?
course, yeah.
So
But that's why it's kind of a combination of the things.
it is a combination, but in saying it's a combination, you and I are saying the same thing.
Yeah.
There's an element of agency that is retained. I would say for almost all people. I do think there are people who have lost it, if you will, in the sense. I mean, I think there is a legitimate insanity plea.
Sure.
But it's been way overused because we have an underlying commitment to materialism and determinism. Here, let me tell you a story that.
But let me step in that.
Yeah, go ahead.
We also have psych drugs. You know, there's a real issue with that as well. There's a lot of people that are on medications, and medications have horrible side effects and unintended effects, and there's a lot of that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a big fan of the work of Jeffrey Schwartz, the UCLA psychiatrist, has written the book "You Are Not Your Brain," and he shows that those psychotherapeutic drugs can be helpful in stabilizing people, but that for many anxiety disorders, it's also really important to retrain the thinking patterns that lead to anxiety. That there's a mind over matter aspect as well as the material substrate aspect. And I think you and I are saying the same thing effectively. That if you say there's a combination of factors involved, and one of them is our own human agency, then we're saying that we retain free will even in the face of predisposing materialistic factors.